participate in this discussion. My name is Amelia Andersdotter. I work with information and communications technologies and intellectual property rights in the European Parliament. My political affiliation is the Piratpartiet, or the Swedish Pirate Party. As opposed to many other speakers at this conference, my political party wasn't really and isn't really formed to investigate new technologies or the death of anonymity. We came into being because some things that used to be right, like a network of free communication, interaction, possibilities to develop yourselves, your friendships, is turning into something wrong, something that's closed and restricted and full of commercial interests, also regulators. For whatever reason, the general approach by regulators and legislators to ICT is very judgmental. We heard yesterday a mention of gamers as not being part of the information highway. If the communication bit of ICT is anything worth mentioning, I would say that gaming is quite communicative. Also, there's quite a lot of information in there. I mean, it takes a while before you figure out how the leveling system in the Elder Scrolls game works. So, yeah. The other, one of the feelings I get also from the legislators and the regulators is that different parts of the organization, especially in Europe, is where I notice they don't appear to be knowing what the other parts of their organizations are doing. So ICT is seen as a security threat, which is very visible in the Cybercrime Convention, or the recent Hungarian presidency of the European Union made cyber security agenda that was likened with digital Schengen, basically restricting off our beautiful non-geographical internet space into something very confined and geographically limited. We have DJ Markt also, that is pursuing very much the commercial interests of copyright industries, telecommunication providers, and at the same time we're kind of sitting here at this European Commission-sponsored event where everyone talks about how great things will be, how much information will flow over borders, and not to mention world peace, which has been mentioned consistently since the opening event on Wednesday night. The fact is that the data aggregation, the subsequent analysis of metadata that build these fantastic cognitive networks, and then bringing the ICT back to IT only. It's just information technology, and the technology is in the hands of commercial actors, and the data, our data, is also in the hands of commercial actors. Now with technological protection measures and encryption schemes being built directly into the hardware, we are even losing the control over the devices we bought, that we thought we owned, that we thought we could use in a way so as to get connected with other people. Yesterday, somebody mentioned, can we be free of hacking? Well, I certainly hope not, even disregarding that the hackers are actually the most creative internet and ICT users. They are also the group of people that currently care the most about communication, private communication, anonymous communication, and things that for our personal development, society development, and all these groundbreaking social changes that are mentioned all the time, for them to occur, we need private space. We need an anonymous space where we don't get judged by peers or by society or by even regulators or commercial enterprises. Social pressure and peer pressure are also actually very strong factors in our everyday lives. I think one of the big challenges for the future is that we lack now network infrastructure. So if we want really a sustainable and friendly internet where people can communicate, we need more, we need better infrastructure, we need fiber to the home connections. Wireless connections, I appreciate their value, but when it comes down to it, the wired connections will always be the most stable ones and the most fast ones. This is unavoidable. Ultimately, to achieve this, I believe, I'm of the firm belief even, that we'll have to abandon the interests of the shareholders of our telecommunications providers and infrastructure owners. Maybe we will need a higher amount of public investment in, for instance, dark fiber. And we could then keep the ownership of the dark fiber in the hands of the public and maybe just have the commercial providers at equal terms. All of them provide bit streams and the infrastructure that allows us later to actually send information over this. The differentiated pricing schemes, the throttling down of broadband speeds for perfectly healthy online activities like peer-to-peer protocols, or even when ISPs want to transparent, or for that matter governments want to intransparently block specific content from the users. And these are just strategies really to cope with people communicating too much, right? Like, we're scared that people will suddenly start communicating and interacting too much. That's very stupid. On the digital inner market, like, I like the fact that they use inner market when they talk about the internet, because this is an essentially global thing. You're restricting user interaction across the borders. This is very tangible in intellectual property rights. And it's a failure for both the market and society to reduce something that used to be a global grassroots movement to something that's now very market and socially restrictable. The internet is, and it could be even more than it is now, a global grassroots social space which, I mean, granted, it must be very intimidating for policymakers and legislators who are still quite actually geographically limited in their powers. The big challenge for the European Commission and DG EMSO during the framework Program 8 will be ensuring that the partnerships with the public from the private sector have freely accessible public results. This is currently often not the case, and we need to know what is happening with our public money. And this cloudification and data aggregation things is very exciting, but even more exciting would be to have full transparency and knowledge of the process. At some point, DG EMSO will also have to research how well their policy research is actually being implemented in policy. I know of 2 Framework Program 7 projects, the Communia and the Counter projects, that are both investigating the immense use of the commons and the public domain to creativity and to the public. Now, the response of DG Markt, DG Trade, and the Council of Ministers to these research results has been stricter copyright enforcement and longer protection terms. The FIRE project and PARADISO 2 can hopefully be a vessel for promoting socially considerable policy research and also benefit the implementation of the findings of this social policy research. We need more transparency also from the private sector. We need transparency in the infrastructure management, and not only for the shareholders, also for the people. We need legal enablement of communication, some way of dealing with all of these people who want to restrict free speech or what we share over networks. As for sustainable development of ICT, I think you need to be cautious. The price of copper on the world market is directly proportional to the amount of mining deaths in Chile. To the event that we want to use ICT for sustainable development, ponder. The European energy industry is more and more dependent on nuclear energy. We don't actually have a way of storing the waste, and the permanent storage facilities that we have concocted are based also on copper, which we need to use for our ICT devices and our infrastructure. So at the same time, I read in the paper this morning, and I thought was quite amusing, outside of Antwerpen, they just closed down a plan for building wind power plants because it was destroying the view of the people who were living in the vicinity of the allocated spot. If you want to have sustainable ICT development, I would get a sustainable energy source for all of these things first. I would also consider not using up our copper for storing an inherently unsustainable energy production. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much for the